All right. Recording button set. So this is round two of me teaching about laning phase. So when I was making this outline, I was quite split on whether or not I'm going to do like an entire comprehensive review. That seemed very ambitious. So what I'm most likely going to do is I'm going to like limit the number of like real life application as much as possible until the very end, and then try to like touch like the things that I think are absolutely rudimentary for you to know about laning phase. And then I'm going to have another round of this whenever I can, and then try to go into the specifics because this in like the 30 minutes that I'm going to spend right now should not be taken as dogma, or much less be taken as all the things that you need to know about laning phase, because that is simply silly. But I just couldn't fit it into the hours that I thought it would be, so here it is. This is just going to be the cable content that I'm going to be talking about today. Just the essential information, even minion rule, the basics of wave
Are you sharing
manipulation.
your screen?
Oh, did I not do that again? Jesus Christ. Thank you. And then just the basics of wave manipulation, priority, and then openers. So like I'll just get to a little bit more of the fun parts, and then trading, and then resetting, and then I'll just take a look at a couple of the pro VODs that I was able to get my hands on. Pro view is really hard to get these days unless you're looking up at LPL, so we're just gonna be looking at exactly that. And then we will call it a day. And this is just a picture of me stay indoors, especially if you're staying in LA. It's kind of bad here. So this is going to be the essential information that you guys really need to know. And then, so like, just the basics is just how the minion works, and this is the thing that I just wanted to explain to you. One is that minions start spawning from a minute 5, and then they spawn every 30 seconds. The time in which that they arrive to the directly into the middle of the lane, the mid lane, is 25 seconds after it spawns. From top lane to bot lane, it is slightly longer, so somewhere around 30 to 33 seconds, if I'm not mistaken. And then every 3 waves, there's going to be a cannon minion that spawns along with a minion wave that has been spawned. To give you a little bit more information, the minion wave levels up, or quote unquote upgrades, every time that a cannon wave spawns, so every third minion. And then it doesn't really matter too much in terms of the laning phase, because the level disparity shouldn't be too much for you to really worry about it. But think it is a very useful idea to think of minion waves in a form of units of 3, it being normal, and a cannon. And then another thing to note is that cannon minions start at 60 gold, and then they become 3 more gold expensive every spawn until it caps at 75, and it stays consistent throughout the game. In terms of gold value, you could think of it in the simplest way of thinking it is, if it is harder to kill, it is worth more gold. So melees are worth 63 gold, casters are worth 42, and the cannons are worth 60, and then it increasingly becomes more expensive in combinations of all 3. This is not the individual units of them, but this is specifically how, if you successfully catch every single wave, then that's what's going to be shown as the case. So if you kill 3 melees, you're going to get 63 gold pretty much. One little thing too, mid lane cannons waves are always worth 10 gold less. Thank Riot for that, because too many mid laners are roaming, and their genius idea of nerfing mid lane was making cannons less expensive. So mid laners are like, so like they have to like catch them more and stuff like that. This is a useful spreadsheet that I found off of one of the attendees' actual Twitter, and this is something that like you just have to keep in mind. You don't have to know literally everything, and I'm going to be referring to the spreadsheet more that we talk about like specific points, but these are pretty much the breakoff points in terms of like the exp, and then the most important ones obviously are the ones for level 6 and the level 9, and potentially level 5. But the one that you probably want to know that are a little bit more useful are these type of ones, where if you CS perfectly, then these are the cutoff points that you should be getting, and this is going to be really important when we're talking about recoil timers and itemizations. But back to the main content. So I'm going to be talking about even minion rule. This is something that I, in my opinion, is the most important role in the laning phase. And the rule is really simple. It's in the earlier stages where the minions don't have a movement speed buff, then whichever side that the wave stays neutral, aka like starts to fight in the middle, and then whichever side that is closer to the nexus will slowly push out to the other side without any type of intervention. Now, this is universal and it applies to 99% of the time. The 1% is when RNG fucks you, and then for some reason the targeting becomes screwy, and then the wave gets hung there for like a little bit longer. But eventually it will always shove out. The reason why this is important is because of the things, because one, you need to understand what the wave is going to be doing if you don't intervene, and understand whether or not it is a benefit to you or it is to your disadvantage. And then the second thing that you need to identify is what your champion can do to prevent it if it is against your self-interest, or propose it even better, and to prevent them from making the thing that is going to be unfavorable to them. And that's just going to be when trading is going to be coming in. I'm going to be covering like the really basics of like how to do wave manipulation, because it is like going to be important for the future conversations that we're going to be having. And then it's pretty much the two states of pushing and then freezing, and then differently, and how differently it actually makes the case. First is when the wave pushes back to you, specifically when the wave is like in a neutral position, or if the wave is stacking up and then pushing against you, you have usually two options. One is that if you choose to only last hit, and then when you last hit, then what you're basically doing is you are prolonging the location in which the minion wave is going to be sitting at that place for the longest time. What that means is that since it is in the middle of the wave, and instead of being farther away than your minion, there's a higher chance that your minions will arrive faster and stack up into a larger unit than the enemy. What this usually entails is that you could consider it as a DPS battle, where your champion is an addition to the DPS. But if you have tanked minions early in the game, you will understand that a wave worth of minions, or even two waves worth of minions, can easily out DPS what you could possibly do to a wave, unless you're Zoe or some shit like that, or Rise. Excuse me. And then what that implies is that you're going to be stacking up the wave, and then it will be a much bigger wave that is going to be going in. Of course, it accelerates, and the push accelerates as there's going to be more minions on your side of the map, and it's going to be slowly pushing out. And what it will result in is a ginormous wave that is going to be crashing into the tower, where you could definitely do a lot of things with it. Another thing that could potentially happen is when you just use all your abilities to fast shovel in. That means that the wave is most likely not going to be stacked, and it will be either sent in units of one arriving and then another arriving the moment that the second one gets cleared. Or if the spacing is slightly less optimal, then what you will most likely see is that by the time that the wave has been cleared, then the wave will return to the neutral position in the middle of the lane, and it will meet again. Freezing is another thing that is like being actively talked about, especially with it being like a really huge advantage in a lot of the ways. But a freeze, in that by definition, is basically where you are creating a standstill formation where there are more minions of the enemy kind that is on your side of the map, and as a result, the DPS is so big to the point that despite the proximity of the minion wave being closer on your side, your minion waves die faster. As a result, the location stays in that place for long periods of time. So when that happens, and what you're allowed to do is you are able to, one, stack up the enemy minion waves and then constantly farm it. It actually creates a really good state for you most of the time, because you are hugging your tower. As a result, you are less prone to dives or even aggressive trades from melee champions for the most part. Another thing that you are preventing yourself from doing is, especially if you have Fog of War to play with, or if you're an excellent trader yourself, then you are effectively denying an opportunity for the enemy to farm the minion wave that is coming into you from your side. But while a freeze can be very powerful, it is conditional. There are some conditions that you must accomplish, and these are some of them. One is that the enemy cannot hamper the wave by using spells, or straight up out trading you and driving you out. You have to be better at trading than the champion, if not equal. Remember that you're inherently at a disadvantage when you fight in a frozen wave, mainly because there are always going to be more minions on their side. As a result, whenever you aggro the enemy champion, then all those minions will start hitting you. So unless you're like unless you're playing like an unrenacted riven matchup and then you're perma freezing, then there's definitely that things to think about. Second is when it's really important that an ally jungler is hovering near your lane or at the very least not seen, because if you have that to your advantage and the jungler has to can potentially be top lane, then what you can do is one, you can feint and then rush forward whenever they're walking up towards the trade. Most intelligent top laners would just immediately back off, or even most intelligent like any laner will back off in this situation, and then they'll just run away. Because if they ever get caught overextended with the frozen wave and then they immediately die, then what that's going to happen is that the freeze is going to be undone, and then the big wave is going to get stacked against them, and then it's just going to push all the way, and then they're going to lose even more CS and EXP. But this is also without noting that you also have to think about where the enemy jungler is, because if your jungler is not on your side and the enemy jungler shows up, then the freeze is just finished, because they're just going to have hover and they're going to be able to safely push the wave in. Or think about the situation where they also have the bigger minions than you. So if your jungler and the enemy jungler actually matches, and they have a 2v2 battle, then unless you have a superior 2v2, then again you have the minions against you, so there's a chance that you also lose. Because one of the things that I see a lot that people just try to do all the time is they try to freeze for no apparent reason, but these are the conditions that are required, and oftentimes if you don't respect these, then you will get punished. So we're going to talk about the word priority that you hear a lot in pro games, whether in comms or set by casters. And priority pretty much revolves around the idea that the enemy is obliged to do something while you have nothing to do. As a result, you're allowed to do anything that you want. This normally happens when you crash a wave into the enemy's tower. So because the tower is a very strong tool, because it is probably the most efficient way for the minion wave to get killed unless the laner is there to clean it up. If you don't know, then the caster minions die much faster, but they die in 2 hits, and then the melee minions die in 3, and then the cannon dies in 7. So when that happens, and then you're in a situation where the enemy cannot possibly be there, or they're not present to pick up that farm, then that gold and EXP are just merely going to disappear. So, for example, in this type of picture, in this illustration, the caster is now forced to stay in bot lane as long as the tower is hitting them, just to make sure that he gets his farm. Otherwise, he just simply loses all of it. And what could Syndra do in this situation? It just means that she doesn't necessarily need to be in lane, because those minions are not going to be hitting the minions and effectively going to be killing them, so she never needs to farm them. In fact, she probably doesn't even need to farm them until the minion wave actually pushes back to neutral, in which then she will have to return. So during that timer, she has about like 15 seconds to either to get out of the mid lane and then pressure the other side. These are the couple of options that you could get off of the priority that you often obtain. One being that you could roam to side lane for gank or pressure. This normally requires a very massive wave, like about like 1.5 to 2 waves, because otherwise like you're gonna be losing a lot. Unless I guess you're playing as fucking Cassidy, I guess, because the champion has 0 wave clear. Or you could invade enemy jungle, which is more common, where the mid laner is busy and then you're also backing them up. As a result, it creates a temporary 2v1, and then you get a situation where the enemy jungle has to back off because they don't want to die. Third one is one that you often see a lot in competitive, but not so much in solo queue, where you hover aside and then just stay hidden to secure a neutral objective such as Scuttlecrab or even Dragon. Or if there is already a skirmish that is happening, and then whether it be favorable or unfavorable, if the enemy mid laner just disappears from the map, then the side laners are always discouraged to make the play because they don't know where they are, and if they engage on the play and then there's a potential numbers disadvantage, that it is of terrible peril. So then these are the basics so far, and then now I'm going to be talking about openers. So like way that you plan your game, and then the way that you plan your lane, and depending on then how exactly you're going to execute some of these plans. And then this is when you actually have to think about a couple of concepts that I really personally enjoy talking about. So whether your champion is a pusher or a puller. So this is when you have to take a look at your champion and actually think about what you actually want to do. Your champion could potentially be a puller. These are champions that would prefer to have the minion wave on their side of the lane because either one, they have terrible ways, like they have terrible means to disengage from a gank. They have either zero mobility or they have really poor skirmishing early, so they can't 2v1 in a situation or bail themselves out. Um, and oftentimes, like these are the guys that would not necessarily want to shove out the lane for priority and go for lanes, and in fact they will much prefer to freeze the lane in front of their tower or create a neutral lane so that the enemy is prevented from roaming as much as possible. They're off, and it's coincidentally a lot of the champions that like to have their minion pulled to their side are often scalers. Vladimir, Jinx, Corki, Anivia, and then Ornn are like great examples. Even Malphite in certain extent can often be a puller, but for different reasons. Because some of these champions actually share the common idea of the fact that when they're hugging the tower, and they could have a one-sided duel or like a one-sided trading for like one or even two timers, then they could actually go for solo kills. Notable examples of this is like Malphite top lane, where you're freezing, where you could temporarily freeze the melee minions and then just have the melee minions die to tower, and then you have a 3-caster freeze, and then you could triple Q, and then they actually have to respect your level 5, because if they lose trades excessively, then they have to recall, because we know what happens when Malphite hits 6. Vice versa. Pushers are the ones who want to shove out your lane and then try to create an advantage through it that way, because either they are excellent in terms of the wave control and they're great at trading early. As a result, they're the ones that were able to get that priority that we just talked about and that impact other lanes. These are actually the champions that you would notice that are being picked in competitive a lot more, because we see Syndra all the time, we see Lucian all the time. Pantheon was often banned, that he never got an opportunity to show up in competitive, but he is a prime example of a pusher. Jace is something that we also don't see a lot in North America because of the obvious meme of NA Jace, but he is also a champion that you would like to see control the lane, get immense trades off, and then just go to a side lane or just go to other places to like impact the game. Zoe is like my prime example of a champion that I would consider a pusher, along with Syndra, because her wave clear in mid lane is so uncontestable for a majority of the champions that she's able to exert so much pressure to the point that junglers cannot touch Raptors whenever there's a good Zoe player in the game. Then now I'm going to be specifically talking about how trading should work and what specifically it implies, because now like our next step most likely will be adding purpose and intent into specifically the things that we do. So one thing to point out is that trades and matchup between really good players will rarely result in a solo kill. In fact, majority of the reasons why really good players ever trade in the first place is not necessarily to kill them, but to create a favorable situation in the lane that gives them autonomy over the minion wave. Because ultimately, laning phase is not necessarily a contest to kill each other. It's often a contest to get more minion waves, get more EXP, and then at the same time create as much pressure for the other players in the game. Of course, the most primary resource for you in League of Legends, not only excluding the laning phase, is HP. But another thing that you have to think about is actually mana as well, because oftentimes it is a ability that pretty much enhances your ability to like fight and then also do trading. And then if you're also able to maintain your mana usage, it is something that you're going to be able to consistently deliver, as we're talking about recall timers. When I have these type of situations where Orianna's like engaging on a Zilean right here because she hit level 2 and her level 1 phase is really stronger, she doesn't necessarily care about taking these melee range minions, because if she could effectively zone Zilean off of the level 2 and then push him out of the potentially from trading aggressively at the brief timer that Zilean is not about to hit level 2. The moment this melee minion died, if he has not missed any EXP, then he will. So she's just taking advantage of that timer and then just getting as much HP trade as possible, because the moment the Zilean starts getting double bombed, then the matchup in terms of lane priority just turns very sour for the champion. So this is a prime example of her understanding like the matchup and then taking the advantage of it before the pendulum swings on the other side. This is like my one. If you could learn anything from this short take like lesson, stop recalling whenever you want to. It's and have purpose when you're actually recalling. So this is when I'm going to be pulling out specifically like documents in terms of the way that we play the game, and then exactly give you details on how to like blueprint the game. And think of recalling as a way from deploying the base in the most efficient way possible, with the most ideal items at a time that you would like most likely lose the least number of minions, and simultaneously have the most impact in the game because you have accomplished those latter two. First that we need to talk about are our most ideal recall timers. There are often like quite frequent ones. There's one recent one where you recall at 900, which I will talk about a little bit later because it just popped in my head. But the most famous recall timers are the ones for Lost Chapter, the 1300 gold spike, the tier 2 boots, which is 1100, and then there's also cheater recall. To explain a little bit on what cheater recall is, if you're effectively able to have control over the first, like if you have control over the lane at level 1 and level 2 so much to the point that you're actually able to slow stack the first two minion waves, then by the time that the third minion wave arrives, then the first minion wave like kind of thins out and there's only like one or two casters left. So you basically effectively shove out a wave up 5 to 6, like probably 5 caster minions, 1 cannon, and then 3 melees, and that is enough for you to create like for the enemy tower to stay engaged and hitting the towers for so much that the moment that the wave crashes and you recall and then you return to lane, then you effectively lose only about a minion or two worth of golden exp. So you, and usually by the time that if you CS perfectly, well not perfectly, if you CS well and then you recall after 3 items, then you usually get 450. You usually get 450 gold, where you could either get a Dorn's item, or tier, or even coal for certain situations. Another tip that I want to give you is the second minion wave rule. So when I told you that it is really useful for you to think of the minion wave in terms of units, right? So a single unit is normal, and then cannon. So the most ideal timers for you to recall is playing around the timer that the second minion wave is arriving. So here's why. When you play around that, you actually are able to effectively shove out the enemy and crash the wave at that timer, then the enemy has two dilemmas. So first is, we talked about slow pushing and fast shoving, and both options are slightly unfavorable because of these reasons. First is that if the wave is crashed and then they have to bounce the wave back, then by the time that the wave bounces back, then your cannon minions are going to be spawning and it's going to be running to mid lane, and so is theirs. So if they fast shove and they try to create as much CS loss, then what's going to happen is that the cannon minion is going to arrive from the enemy team, and then the cannon is going to soak up 7 whole tower shots. So by the time that you return to lane, then you're only going to be effectively losing a cannon and a melee versus losing about three melees and then potentially a couple ranged. Remember that at the earlier stages, cannon's actually worth less, so effectively getting those 3 melee minions is much more important in terms of like your value. But let's say they slow shove. Then if they slow shove, then this is what could potentially happen. If they return to lane on time and they're actually able to thin out the wave before it crashes, then what will happen is that they're actually stuck in lane and they can't recall themselves. And then they're potentially going to be stuck in lane with about like 1,000 gold at hand. And if they don't have TP, then they're going to have to ask for bail. And if they have TP and their jungler is not available, then they're going to have to use that summon spell for no reason. So creating those type of situations is always going to be helpful. So keep that in mind and then try to put that in, practice that into your game. So ran through majority of the things that I want to talk about. So now I'm going to be looking at a couple of gameplays and then I'm going to be commenting on it with using the information that I just talked about like earlier. So this is like, this guy's like actually really helpful because he posts a lot of pro views for like LPL millionaires. because like they're actually able to like hold things physically instead of like in North America and LCK also doing everything remote. As a result, pro view is impossible for them to recreate. So give this guy a sub. He's very helpful. So let me note that this is a Galio versus TF matchup. This is something that you will often see a lot in mid lane. And the way that TF plays this is actually pretty intelligent. Or rather, he is the way that he's supposed to play it. First is one thing that I didn't talk about that I'm going to be talking a lot more in detail is your starting item. And in application of this, the TLDR version is between the argument between Doran's Ring and then Corrupting Potion is if you are confident that you're able to prolong your stay in mid lane until the 1300 gold spike and that you're able to get the Lost Chapter, then Doran's Ring is a superior option. However, if your champion spikes earlier than that or you do not need Lost Chapter, then definitely getting Corrupting Pot and then using TP to return to lane is a much favorable option as well. But with that in mind, the way that this lane works is that Galio actually has immense push advantage if he's allowed to stay in the middle of the wave. So like this is the reason why Rookie identifies this, and that's the reason why he's positioned here. Because a lot of the mages, and one of the mistakes that they do make is that they play around behind their minion waves too much. And because of a simple reason. Minion waves hurt early. So like if he auto-attacks Galio right here, then instantly these two are going to pull back towards him and start hitting him. And then they're going to start hitting him too. So he's going to temporarily get 5 people DPSing him. And that will be not worth the trade that he is trading. But he doesn't actually care about that too much. Because it's simple. Because he has core pot. So he's actually willing to trade HP. And as a ranged champion, that he actually has the advantage to do this because Galio has to walk forward and has this, as an addition, put one more state or one more turn of walking up into the minion wave and hitting them, while TF doesn't have to necessarily make the same motion. He could just auto-attack from far away. And he's just taking advantage of that rule. And this is like something that you will see a lot of players do, where if you look at the way that he's playing, he's not necessarily hitting the minion wave. And the turn, like the way that it ends up doesn't necessarily lead to like a favorable matchup, but the reason why you shouldn't shove this is because of the way that the cannon wave is arriving. And when the cannons arrive here and then there's a tower right here, then the DPS is going to be so much to the point that the wave is going to be held up right here. And the reason why it's not as good is because if the Galio chooses to shove towards his side and that he's playing around here, then think about the situation with TF. TF actually can't trade against Galio because he's too close to tower. And then if 1 in a million, if a Graves is ever like showing up to a side wave like this, and then he shows up at this timer because he has done the triple clear either on his side and then is like swapping over and then just takes this one additional timer, that he has to burn flash. And that's not what TF wants to do in this matchup. He wants to like stay alive as much as possible and creating maximum pressure. So that's why he's not shoving this right now. And he's using that timer to just trade Galio as much as you want. This is like the first mistake that he makes, because I personally don't think that he should have like auto-attacked this as much as possible, because the second wave crash is really bad for him. And if he didn't actually auto-attack it and the wave actually gets hung right here, then the best part about this is that he only gets to enjoy the protection of this minion wave for a brief time, because the way that the wave works, and the wave is just going to be slowly shoving back towards the TF side. And at that time is when he's going to be able to constantly trade. And they're going to be able to neutralize because he has TF red card. But this is like a temporary priority that I was talking about, where Galio is now forced to like get these 3 range minions. And then that 1 melee minion that crashed, and during that timer, then TF is actually able to go leave mid lane and then ward Raptors for his jungler. And then notice how Rookie is not necessarily hitting the minion wave at all, and he's just entirely focused on hitting Galio. Why would that be? It's mainly because he understands the basics of trading, like we talked about. Whenever you have an HP and / mana advantage, then you're putting yourself at a good circumstance where you're able to pretty much gain autonomy over the lane because they're too low. They can't walk forward to trade because if they trade for too much, then they might die. If there's a jungler around, then they're definitely going to die. So this is this is a situation where he doesn't necessarily have to pamper the minion wave too much, and it is to his advantage. And you're wondering if there's not much of a counterplay for Galio, and there unfortunately isn't much because TF is early, because of TF's range matchup, and the fact that he's pretty much playing with this ward now that he has access to, because he technically understands where Graves is going to be potentially in the long run, because the champion does not like cheese ganking, and as a result his setup is rather poor. And this is when we get a small glimpse of like the way that this is playing, and the reason why he's playing like this. And another point that I would definitely like to talk a little bit more about later is because he's entirely playing around cover. Now you notice that he's actually hitting him a lot less and actually play right out of his E range. The reason why he's doing that is because his jungler is pathing away from him. When you notice that he was trading excessively, rather aggressively like this, and then entirely playing to trade Galio's HP was when Lilia was close in proximity. But the farther and farther that she gets away from mid lane is when he actually tries to play a little bit more safe, because he knows that he immediately cannot get help from his teammate. And every single time that he has like most moves like this is especially when he has those timers. And notably, this is a timer where he's additionally vulnerable because he doesn't have gold card available. And then to keep everything in context, now since he actually went corrupting pot, then his entire goal is to get a favorable recall and then just pretty much get a better item lead. And this is a moment where this is a really good habit that a lot of mid laners don't do, especially Jensen. I flame him all the time for it, where he doesn't hover the right side of the map. The only reason why this gank is nowhere much of a threat, even though Graves showed himself, is because he actually hugged the bot side of the map like this towards the side of the Lilia. And by doing so, he is assuring that at least one person is going to be able to help them if he has to run directly down to avoid the gank. At the same time, if the Graves happens to be on the bot side as well, then he's at least able to know like what's specific direction that he could change from, especially if Lilia has hover. Because these are moments in circumstance where if he actually desires to have these type of plays, then he can just accomplish it solely off of the fact that he's on the right side of the map. And then right now, if you look at the wave state, the reason why he gets to stay one step further is because he actually has control over the wave. And then right now, if despite him coming down here and the wave is neutral, Galio cannot hit this wave, because if he does, then there's currently 3 people on the river, and then if he gets jumped and pushed out of the way, and then they actually crash the wave into him, then it grants TF a free recall. So he's being respectful of that, and Rookie understands that, so he's saying one additional wave instead of resetting immediately. And then this is a timer that I was specifically talking about, the 900 gold timer. So you actually could gain 900 gold off of the passive regen even before the 6 minion wave drops. If you see as well, and then you actually, the number actually might be skewed because of TF, but you could definitely get a 850 gold reset because I was doing the work with Bandleglass off of the 6 minion wave. So most likely, if you CS it well, then you're going to be able to get this reset off as well. And then the reason why this is good, again, is because if the cannon wave is present in the middle of the lane, then even if the turret crashes, then the cannon wave just tanks a little bit more of the shots. And then he just TPs back, and then he just crashes it in. And then he maintains the prio for the entirety of the lane.
Can I bring something up?
Oh yeah, sure.
So I have a question regarding when you're saying that TF is hovering the proper side. When re-looking at level 1, he had no information to know that Graves, like the buff that Graves had started.
Yeah.
Because red side bot lane did not leash. And in fact, it looks like it's the case that red top side fake leashed. So why... So I agree hovering your jungler tends to be a good idea, right? But based on him having a ward on top side, what would... He's gambling odds of where Graves is at this point, right? Like that's the decision he has to make. So why would you say unequivocally that him hovering bot side is the proper side?
Because so let me get to the specific side and then talk about it. So like you're talking about, so after he drops this ward and then he just immediately knows that Raptors is not taken, I'm pretty sure he's able to deduce exactly what's going to be happening, because off of this, he gets a pretty good reason. He gets a pretty safe reasoning that the only way that this has not been taken at this timer is that he started on the boss side of the map, or because like, if he takes red and then just takes Krugs and then immediately heads down here, that's not the realistic Graves pathing. And then off of this info, then he knows that he started on like Graves started on the boss side and the scale pathed it up, or he's afraid of like any type of cheese plays happening. As a result, he went for Krugs in the red, then he's gonna be taking this. And then I think that's a safe assumption for him to make off of the information that he has. And then if that happens, then precisely from this timer, then he knows that it usually like junglers hover around the time, like hover around the camps of the respawn rate, and every respawn rate for jungle is 2 minutes. So when that happens, and then he specifically knows that the top side has not yet been taken as of now, then even when he has those risk assessment, then he knows that Graves cannot effectively be up there, be down there just because of this ward right here. I think that's just all the info that he needs, frankly, because there's no way in the world that Graves doesn't take this camp, right? And he actually just like is able to garner that information just off of the wave clear, unless I'm missing something, because I don't think that's that much of a gamble.
We just saw Graves.
Yeah, it's either he's egregiously messing up his clear or he's just flipping it. Because ultimately, like when he's doing this, it is yet again 3 minutes timer, and if he started on bot side, that he cannot be down here because these camps won't be up. These are not going to come up until at least like 4 minutes and 20 seconds. So I think that's a safe bet to make. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, at 3:15 we also saw him on the top ward.
Yeah, for sure.
The TF places it on the right pixel. So, I was just asking because I think that creativity is very important when looking at the high level play, and so I would like to see Graves do things like skip Raptors to create a play like that if it ends up in a kill based on X percentage.
Yeah, that does make sense. Like it would definitely trip him up for sure. Like if Graves enters through lane bush and then just wraps TF, then he at least has to burn flash, otherwise just straight up dies. But I think to your point, if TF is like early aggressively trading like level 1 towards Galio, then he most likely could like predict that there could be a ward there. So in like really high levels, I totally see that backfiring, because that's the flaw of level 2 push. Let's look at another one. This one's rather so like we saw the matchup where we're getting two pushers. Now we're gonna see a matchup where there's gonna be one specific bias of one constantly want to shove in, and one that is on a timer, and another that is like more than happy to just let the lane neutralize and then just play the game out. Jackie Love is really good at Kai'Sa for a couple reasons. One is that he knows how to range bandage better than almost any AD carry in the world. Another is that he knows specifically timers of which he has to use Q to thin out the wave. And this is the most important thesis for Kai'Sa and for bot lane, because thinning out the wave in bot lane is pretty much the bread and butter of the way that the lane manipulation should work early. If you look at the matchup, Jhin has pure range advantage and trade advantage in terms of Kai'Sa, because his abilities and auto attacks simply just reach Kai'Sa better. And the fact that like only reason why they're actually not going for a level 2 early push like this is because they know that it's futile. Because when this actually happens, and then you know for a fact that they started bot leash, normal situations, then you will immediately see their bot laners try to rush to level 2 and they get that little level advantage and try to like snowball the game off of that. But there comes a risk. If you try to go for level 2 lead, and then you don't have a clear like timer or of strength on the other team, then what's going to happen to the wave is that it's going to push over here, and then it's going to get stuck here. And when it does, and they actually have as equal, if not stronger, which they do, level 2 than yours, then they're going to be able to stack this wave until 3, and they get a level 3 advantage and shove you back out. And then at that timer, then they could either get a cheater recall off or get immense pressure onto the enemy blue buff, which could additionally lead to further pressure of Graves being driven out and then losing dragon control as a result. So that's why they're not shoving. So even though like the level 2 actually is like a benefit to them, they're just letting it happen. And then the reason why is because they actually do the same exact play that I talked about, but the other way around. But it is of better benefit to them because they actually much prefer to have the wave towards their side. Again, they're polars. And the reason why I say this is because what happen? Let's see what happens when there's a 3 range minion advantage on the other side, and then the wave actually starts creeping in. Like we said, the number of times that it is required for you to take a freeze is precise somewhere around the line of three to four caster minions. 3 if they're completely healthy, it is doable. 4 if they're slightly bruised, or if you have a cannon minion, you can manipulate it as much as you want to control it. And then these are these are situations where you have to think about their mindset and then the whether or not like this actual crash is good for them. Ideally, you want to freeze this lane for the longevity of the lane, but realistically, it is impossible because they have superior trading at the moment off of Jhin 4-shot and also Galio just being able to purely lock you down and the champion having insane base damage early. But you have one thing to your advantage: they don't know where the jungler is. So realistically, even though Graves like full clearing, like he said, there's always a world where Graves just twists the pathing and it comes down here. And if the Jhin gets locked down here with 50% HP at underneath this tower, then he just dies. So Zhu just takes the trade. And then the best part about it is that because he took the trade at that time, the wave actually gets semi-frozen. And then now they have the wave to their advantage, and then they're slowly going to be able to take grab autonomy over the lane. Because now Jhin without flashes, without Alistar not having used flashes at all, then just off of that one play, they just made their lane into a much more favorable state. And then you could see that Graves actually actively tries to stop pushes from happening early to make sure that this wave is that they stay doomed. And now just off of that, Graves just got Jhin heal, and as a result, the bot lane has no sums. And throughout this entire time, unless they have active assurance that Graves is not there, then they cannot even move up. Realize how Jhin is not moving up because of the support's intelligence to not show on purpose. Because twofold. One is that if he walks up here, and then the Graves actually pats down like this along with Alistar, then he just straight up dies. So he can't actually walk up the trade. Another is that if Alistar actually shows up here, then the Graves flanking alone by himself is actually not big enough of a threat for the Jhin to be dissuaded from farming. So the support effectively staying in fog like this pretty much denies the entirety of the CS. And then he's able to just effectively just wave clear back and then just get an insane CS lead in a matchup that he would normally be disadvantaged in. And then the best part is that since Jackie Love knows his reset timers, he currently has 700 gold. Clearing this would not give him the 875 or the 7 that he wants, and he does not want to go for a longsword recall because that's usually not ideal. So he's just staying in the lane as long as possible and then just last hitting. He's not fast pushing because he knows that like as long as the Graves is on his side, that they could always fake and then just scare the Jhin away from making any aggressive plays that is to his lane's advantage. And the worst part now is that since the Jhin had to reset for HP and not for items, now like as long as Kaisa gets bailed at any of these timers, and then that one timer is going to be the time that she's going to be able to just become insanely strong. Now realize that like they're just playing, and now look at the way that the wave looks. Since the Graves is not on their side of the map, then the wave is all naturally pulled into them. That makes them safe from ganks, and at the same time, they're also the ones that are more than happy to have the wave in front of them because they like trading under it. So they're accomplishing their duo's identity at the same time getting a little lead for themselves. And then this is another application of the turret rule, because even if Jin turbo pushes this like this, and then he tries to match the reset timer, then what Jackie Love just always has to make sure how to do is when he returns to lane, the cannon minion tanks all the shots, and then he's able to get the cannon because he's a good player, and he effectively only loses 2 minions off of the reset, and he has Newton Quiver. So in both ways, it is of great success for him. Then we'll look at the last one and we'll call it a day. I think today is going a little bit longer, but I don't mind because I'm enjoying talking about laning phase all the time. This is a top lane matchup this time, and this is a example of what you should do when you are playing against a puller. Like I said, Ornn is a champion that likes to pull the wave towards their side and then just play towards their advantage. And when that happens, then we have to think consciously about how to play the lane to our advantage at the same time. Because if we play it lackadaisically, then we're just accomplishing Warren's win con of shoving the lane towards him, and then he's able to happily pick it up and then just freeze his tower. The virtue of top lane and this role, the reason why I love trading in this role so much is because of the usage of the top lane bushes. One thing to know about the minion wave is that the moment that they lose sight of you, then they will stop attacking you. They'll immediately re-aggro on the enemy champion, and then look at this. And the way that the rule works is that there's a set of priorities that the minion waves will hit in order in which that it was hit. And there's certain rules. First one is that the moment that you hit an enemy champion, then no matter what the minion wave was doing in the past, it will start aggroing onto you. And then the second point is that if you wish to de-aggro, then all you have to do is get out of their sight, and then they'll immediately re-aggro to the target that is closest to their proximity, like this. So despite him actually actively trying to play out the lane, and then just play to their advantage, you can see that Nars just constantly he's not even worried about last hitting this much. He only hit 2 of these minions. All he cares about is Ornn's HP. Why is that? Because the wave state at the moment is in complete control of himself. He attacks faster, and he is an auto melee based champion, and he's playing Gnar, which means that his level 2 is always formidable because of Mega Gnar and the shrewd amount of gold that you gain just off of the elite. And this is when he fully understands what he has to do to gain control over the lane. Because now Ornn has to respect his level 2, and this is just the way that the matchup works. And the way that Ornn's trying to play around it is by using the bushes in a completely different way. He's using it so that the Gnar doesn't auto him. Because a lot of the top laners here, that the rookie mistake will be warding this bush. But the moment they see this ward, then it means that Gnar is immediately vulnerable for a gank. Although they don't know the location of the Lilia, if the person's overextended like this and just champion with arguably the worst base stats in the game when he's mini, is overextended this far into Ornn's pulling lane, and he ever gets comboed, then he just dies. Any jungler. So he can't afford to use a ward here. And then the Ornn player knows that, so he's just playing around the bushes to make sure that he doesn't get auto-attacked.
One thing that's worth noting is just that D-Shield provides a lot of HP regen. So even though he's taking 32 damage, it's not actually 32 damage.
Yeah, effectively, especially with second wind, that you're basically able to regen majority of it to the point that you're only taking 10 damage per auto. But what you can't do is play disrespectfully in timers that are about to hit, because this is a prime example of of this sheet helping you. Because what this guy didn't think about is when Gnar hits level 3. At the third minion wave, especially when you're actually able to count the minion wave properly, you actually don't even need to kill the full minion wave in order to get 3. You just need to kill 1 melee, or you just need to kill 2 melees, or cannon, and then you just immediately hit it. And then this guy didn't miscalculate the timer, and then now all of a sudden his lane's lost. Because yeah, Ornn's getting his brittle procs, but he now all of a sudden burned flash and now has to burn a potion in a defensive way rather than using it after completing a trade, because Ornn trades earlier formidable. I am an Ornn enthusiast. I will always propose that champion's just trading when done early is just like absolutely insane. And this all of a sudden became the worst way possible for him, because now Gnar has all the options in the world. One, he could cheat a Recoil, and then just get a Cold, and then just farm out the Ornn, and then just get an item lead. Another thing that he could do if he wants to play very oppressively is get another Doran's Ring, and then the Doran's Shield, Doran's Blade, and then just Omnivamp the Ornn damage away. I probably wouldn't recommend that. Another thing that he could do is, since he knows that he is in a range matchup for the most part, he could get boots and then refill, and then one control ward to prevent ganks, and then all those three options are unfavorable to him because he doesn't lose anything from recalling here. But the reason why the Shy stays here is because of two things. One is that he immediately identifies the Grace's spot size, so he cannot be ganked. Another is that the ideal timer for Gnar to recall is usually when he's able to get a specific item timer, such as the, I don't know, it's the 1100 gold one that builds right into Strikebreaker. Somebody tell me the item if I don't, because it's just like not popping in my head. Or tier 2 boots.
Iron Spike Will, I think.
Alright, thank you. No, that's a 1200 one. Not it's the one that gives him attack speed. But yeah, anyway, the reason why he stays here is because of those reasons. He wants to stay until that timer hits, and then as long as he keeps Ornn under his tower and prevent him from freezing, that's the most important part, then he is playing to his advantage. And now you're wondering, why is the Shy like shoving the wave into him when he could just pull the wave towards his side, right? After all, Ornn is a puller. He likes having the wave on his side. Well, this is an exception. This is like a good example of the case where he wants to constantly shove the wave in because he wants to prevent the Ornn from recalling without using a resource. Because let's say that he reset here. Then if he does reset here, then he has to burn TP like this in order to do it. But if he was to pull the lane towards his side and then potentially play for a freeze lane, then these are the potential consequences that has to happen. Look at the way that the Lily is playing. And the way Lily is actually one camp away from not needing to be in this side ever. And then the freeze is only going to establish if the wave was supposed to be here within 2 waves. About a minute timer. 40 seconds a minute, somewhere around there. And then during that timer, then Lily is going to be on the bot side, and as a result, not going to be able to attend Gnar when the wave is frozen on this side of the map. Remember what we said, what happens when the jungler is not able to hover? What if the enemy jungler is actually here to hover and then crash the wave for Ornn? Then you're effectively not gaining anything away from the trade because the trade freeze is going to end the moment that it starts. So that's why constantly shoving them in and forcing the TP instead of pulling the wave back. And as a result, and since he was forced to take a very bad recall where he's not able to get like an immediate item lead, of course it is Ornn, so he's able to get items whenever he wants. Then he's constantly able to just pressure the lane despite not being necessarily ahead in gold. And this is like an important trick that I will definitely talk about later. It's called bluffing. The reason why he's able to play like this, especially when Lilia leaves on this side, is because even if the Graves is here, he's pretty much mind gaming with the Graves by saying that Lilia stayed one additional timer for him to shove this wave effectively in. And he's constantly just playing with his toy. Because now they have to think about the risk assessment. Ornn just used TP, so if he dies here or if he has to take another reset, then the game is over for him. So the risk in which that they lose if there is ever a 2v2 situation on the top side is very high. So if they have to make this play, and then they have to make sure that Lilia is seen on the map on the other side. Luckily enough for them, there cannot possibly be any wards on this side because one, Lilia's in base. They can't drop wards there. And she still hasn't entered the blue side of the map despite bot lane having priority. So there could be a ward here or there could be a ward here, but Lilia hasn't shown herself just yet. And the Shy knows that. So he's constantly able to play this forward despite the jungler not hovering his side. Now this is where I would recommend that he backs off, but in true classic the Shy style, he's still playing aggro. And now he has the full assurance because the Graves is on the bot side. And that is basically where I would like to probably close it, because now I'm getting a little bit like going over the time that I would normally spend. But yeah, thanks for watching. And then if you liked what you saw, then here are my links. Follow me on Twitter. That's all I care about. And I'll just take questions for a couple minutes and I'll just close it.
I have a quick question.
What's up?
Where will this slide be available to like view on our own?
Not slides, but the video itself will be.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm recording it right now as we speak.
Okay, and where will it be posted?
By YouTube. I'll drop the link in Classroom.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Do you have the Galio VOD on hand, the TF Galio one?
Oh yeah, for sure. I can send it to you after the game. I'll just DM you.
Right. So I have a question regarding it.
Okay. Yeah, let's.
So in that game, it's a tempo based jungle matchup, right? So it was Lilia Graves.
Yeah.
I disagree with the way that Galio is playing the lane, and I would like to see him play on 3 waves, spamming Corrupting Potion, recalling, and then grabbing just an early item, so that TF's not allowed to play in this way. What are your thoughts?
So like to explain, like you're probably you're suggesting that he completely gives up control, probably uses well, first of all I think
so he would 6Q these caster this wave, right? And then he would
6Q?
auto.
Okay. All right.
6Q, yeah. And then so obviously that's going to cost him a Corrupting Potion charge. Play to expend all of his Corrupting Potion charges. And what that would do is that it would deny TF the ability to 1, grab ward, but 2, deny the ability for TF to determine when waves are crashing and all the likes. Because then TF has to be worried about losing his flash on the bounce timer.
Yeah.
Or that pulls Lilia to mid to then solve that problem, which then would allow Camille to either engage on Gnar or the Callisto Rel to engage on bot.
Yeah. So I think the way that I would probably recommend that the player plays this is, I don't know about 6-caster Q, because that might make the lane too volatile, because you definitely don't want to have the wave hung here. So I think you probably want to take it a little bit slower and then stack like slow stack if anything. So I'll probably like have him Q here and then just wait for these to get low and then just finish it off with a melee and then just double Q this and then double Q this constantly and then just play the wave with neutral. And then by then, I probably think that like you're probably going to be burning a core pot, and then the second core pot will most likely be used for the second minion wave just to make sure that TF is not allowed to hit the ranged, because if he hits melees, it's completely fine because the casters like deal DPS constantly going to be dealing DPS to the wave anyway. And then third stack to shove, and then maybe that will work because at third wave, like definitely at level 3, TF has to respect timers because usually that's the time the Graves also crosses over. So if he overstands at that time, then he'll most likely get ganked. Then he'll burn flash. Yeah, I think that would be like the way that he'll play. But also like I think that play is also like enhanced because Rookie's going spellbook instead of electrocute. Because if he actually took an aggressive rune, then I'm pretty sure you can't even do that. It's because by the time that you use second core pot, then you're probably gonna be like 50% HP instead of like 75, and you definitely don't want to be in that situation.
You only take an extra 30 damage per wave, so I don't think the rune choice actually significantly changes the amount of damage that you'll take. But in terms of like burning, let's say TF's first spellbook charge, that might have an impact on it, right?
Yeah. I definitely think that.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up the idea because I feel that a lot of people. So I agree with everything that you said as to what Rookie was doing, right? Like I think that was perfectly fine. But I feel that red side mid lane misplayed when you look at the comp holistically because you're not playing too mid, but by faking playing too mid, you are allowing your sides to play more aggro, which fits their volatile lane states.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think that this play could be like this is accomplished as well as he wanted to be because he actually has no say in this despite like burning this many core pots. So most likely, like the timing in which that he engaged with the wave is probably the problem, because that's like the advantage of Galio, right? Your TF's like red card is much less effective than your passive Q combo. So if the enemy wave stacks versus yours, and you play around that, you could basically almost one shot the wave, or make it so like volatile to the point that like, they either have to like purely trade you, which is exactly what you want because you're going core pot, or try to push even faster and then putting themselves in a game timer danger. Yeah, I definitely think that he could have played better.
Cool thing. Just kind of wanted to ask if there was something I was missing on it, because that's the way that I would have advised the Galio to play from wave 1. Because obviously we're watching from Rookie's POV, so that's what we're on. But I feel that there was a significant misplay there.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's also something that I would like definitely bring it up, because yeah, definitely third stacking wave towards Galio is possible. Like I've seen this lane too many times. Like I know that it's possible. But yeah, anybody else? Alrighty then. Then I will just hold it off for today. Then I'm going to like cover the same subject again, but with a bit more depth, because now I got rid of all the basic rules that I'm kind of obliged to tell because of like stuff like that. So like tune in for the next time, I guess. See you guys.